Stand by SOT1.
Standing.
10 seconds. Ready, rolling. Ready, SOT1.
Ready.
In 4, 3, 2, 1. Roll in.
From legendary Uncle Studios in beautiful Southern California, welcome to another edition of Work Comp Matters, the central location for you employees, you employers, and of course, we haven't forgotten about you damn independent contractors. And now, here's this week's edition of Work Comp Matters. It's November 8th, 2021. Welcome to another edition of Work Comp Matters. We are 12 noon straight up, and we are brought to you by mancavepodcasting.com. If you want to do your own podcast anywhere in the world, all you have to do is talk. 818-357-4120. All you need is a smartphone or a computer, and we'll go ahead and produce it, direct it, get it streamed live on social media for you and in the cloud forever, all for one low fee. That's mancavepodcasting.com. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Steve Appel. I'm joined by the madman across the water, the socialist voice of reason, Mr. John Scalia. Stories in the news today that affect you employees, you employers, and of course, we haven't forgotten about you damn independent contractors. A judge takes his mental health struggles public. Also in the news, we have California's COVID case rate is twice that of Florida's and more than Texas. Black students could be disproportionately affected by school vaccine mandates. Proof of vax required is a strict mandate that takes effect in LA today. LA mandate, yeah, that's right. And restaurants in low vaccine areas brace for the new mandate hits. We've also got Aaron Rodgers is in the news. I think a lot of people are interested in that. And last but certainly not least, the federal mandate for 100 employees that Biden was scheduled to go into effect. There has been an emergency stay on that issue. And of course, we've got more stuff. But the first thing I want to talk about is California's COVID case rate. COVID cases in California are no longer falling. They have risen back to the CDC's red level of high virus transmission as the Delta variant continues to wreak havoc, especially in the less vaccinated inland counties of the state. California's case rate is now twice that of Florida and well above that of Texas. And let's see, population in California, close to 40 million. We know that. Population in Florida and Texas is 20 million and 30 million, respectively. I don't think I have that flip-flopped. And of course, both Florida and Texas have been in the news for essentially outlawing all the mandates. And just, you know what, they're not going to force anybody to do. On the other hand, California, though the major mandates have just started kicking in massively. And here in Los Angeles County and the municipality of Los Angeles, where Los Angeles County has 10 million people, municipality of Los Angeles has a little over 4 million people. And we as Californians are not allowed to go into any public place, either in the municipality of Los Angeles or the county of Los Angeles, without, at a minimum, showing our vax passport and potentially showing a negative COVID test within 3 days, which on its face seems reasonable. However, it's the employers that are responsible for checking. And if employers do not check, or if the public goes into a public place with a private business in a public place, it is the employer who can be fined and penalized. I am completely against this. This is the exact same reason why there was an emergency stay granted by an appeals judge on the Biden mandate, which is a federal mandate, that any employees with 100, any employers with 100 or more employees are required to be vaccinated and show a negative test. And the stay was not against the mandate itself, but rather that government is overreaching because government is making the employers responsible to verify this. And if the employers do not verify this, then the employers can be fined. And my understanding, and I haven't read it, is that the appeal and the purpose for the emergency stay was that the employers essentially said, hey, government, we don't address whether or not being vaccinated is the appropriate thing to do. It's that we as employers have to be the watchdogs. And you, governments who initiated the mandates, you are the ones that are supposed to be the watchdogs. So there is currently a stay on an emergency stay on appeal. And John, I don't know if we've discussed this late last week, but what's your take? What's it like out in Germany? Are the employers in Germany responsible and could be fined if they don't check, or is it the government's responsibility? Take a couple of minutes and give us your questions, comments, and your concerns.
It takes 30 seconds to check at the door if somebody's got a vax pass, so it's not really burdensome. In terms of the appellate court, since I am a lawyer, more or less, let me comment on the fact that that appellate court is based in New Orleans. And if you know anything about the way the federal court system works, the senators from each state have a lot of say in who gets to the federal courts. So basically, you're dealing with the court that would still say the South had a right to secede and slavery should be legal. I mean, that's the kind of federal court system you've got. And so when you deal with a federal court, that's why appellate lawyers, if they can, will choose where they take their appeal. I mean, if you've got a liberal case, the most liberal court in America, appellate court, is the Ninth Circuit, the one in California. Okay, that's where you'd file it. And obviously, the Fifth Circuit is the antithesis of that. I mean, you've got a bunch of former, the children of slaveholders who still think it's really a tragedy that the South lost the war and that slavery was abolished. And so we're going to say the government is overreaching because we believe the government has been overreaching ever since 1860. And so, nothing has changed in the deep South. And that's where that comes from. And I fully expect by the time that decision gets up to the Supreme Court, even with the majority of conservatives on the Supreme Court, they're not going to uphold it. They're going to say that the appellate court was wrong and they're going to vacate the stay. I'm pretty confident on that.
I would think that if it gets that high, they are just going to defer it back down to the states because that's the way the law. You don't think so?
No, I mean, they've got a federal ruling. They've got to decide whether or not the federal ruling should take. You can't defer it to the states because the federal court's already taken jurisdiction. So you've either got to decide that they didn't have jurisdiction, which is probably not true. They do. So once you've decided that, you've got to decide whether they were right on the merits. And I think the Supreme Court's going to say, no, you're wrong. Just like you were wrong in 1860, you're wrong now.
I misspoke. What I meant by deferring it to the states, they're going to say, I believe that the federal court does not have jurisdiction, and this will go back to our polio decision in 1905, which essentially said there can be no federal mandates over that, and they deferred everything to each individual state. That's what I meant to say.
Yeah, I think, they will rely on that decision. You're right. But technically speaking, they're not saying that the court doesn't have jurisdiction. The court does have jurisdiction. They just made a wrong decision. And so the Supreme Court's going to say, okay, guys, based on this prior precedent, you were wrong and the decision is vacated. And I'm pretty sure that's what's going to happen. But in the meantime, everybody gets up and down and says, look at this. An appellate court has said the government has overstepped its bounds. Yeah, well, Dred Scott is alive.
I now want to go to what I see is the similarity in Aaron Rodgers' situation, of course, quarterback of the Green Bay Packers, and the Virginia governor's race. Everybody thought that Aaron Rodgers was vaccinated. Then he got COVID-19, and they asked him, and he didn't. They asked him if he was vaccinated, and he said, "I was immunized." Okay.
This is what he said. I saw the press conference where the reporter asked him, "Have you been vaccinated?" And Rodgers said, "I'm fully immunized." The reporter did not. You're not answering my question because the reporter was too stupid, apparently. Yeah.
That question was asked, and if I'm not mistaken, you can check me. This is exactly what Rodgers said. He answered it as follows: "Yes, I'm immunized," or "Yes, I've been immunized."
That I am fully immunized. I don't believe he said yes, but he said, "I am fully immunized." And what he's done is he's taken this voodoo treatment, which is the same treatment Joe Rogan has taken, and he's taken this voodoo treatment, and then now he's claiming that he couldn't take the vaccine because he's allergic to some chemical. Not that Aaron Rodgers could read a chemistry book. I don't think he can read any books, but he's allergic to some chemical in the mRNA vaccine. He didn't specify which one because, of course, you can't read it. But and if anybody believes that, then you believe he was fully immunized. So he's just going around. Basically, he's apparently just a person who believes that he shouldn't have to do anything somebody tells him to do, and he's going to invent whatever reason he wants. The guy is not an authority on anything other than how to throw a football. Okay, and he's great at that. There's no argument there. If anybody watched the Packer game over the weekend, which I did live in German TV, you saw that his substitute Jordan Love is definitely not ready to take that job. And the Green Bay Packers can't wait for him to come back because they need him. And it's obvious. He's a great guy at what he does. But what he does is not epidemiology. It's not medicine. It's not chemistry. It's throwing a football.
And the statement that he is allergic to an ingredient in the Pfizer or Moderna, I would submit to you, John Scalia, that all human beings are going to have an allergic reaction to either taking Moderna or Pfizer because everybody pretty much has some type of side effects. When he said that he has an allergy or he is allergic to it, in my opinion, that's simply overstating the obvious. We all have a side effect reaction, which can be classified as an allergic reaction. Go ahead.
And going back to my favorite group of idiots, sports reporters, when Rodgers says that, all they had to ask him was, which ingredient, and do you have any report from a doctor saying you're allergic to it? That's the difference, but that's the reason they're reporters and I'm a lawyer, because they simply worship at the feet of the people they're supposed to be reporting about.
I also think he was asked, but I'm not entirely certain, why he didn't take the J&J, and I think something came out about there being something that might affect his reproductive system or something like that.
From the CDC saying there's absolutely no evidence of that. Obviously he listens to all these far right podcasts that are telling him, there's an alien chip in the vaccine. It's going to affect your ability to procreate. It's going to affect your ability. Why does he care anyway? The only thing that matters to him is whether he can throw his football.
And then he went on a podcast a couple of days after, and for 45 minutes doubled down on what he was saying, which just made him look more like an idiot. Okay. And I know we're coming up on the break, but I said I was going to compare this to the Virginia gubernatorial race. And a lot of people are saying that, well, firstly, it's absolutely true. A Republican was never expected to win, and a Republican did win. And a lot of people are asking, is this a blowback on Biden, or is this going to affect national politics? And what people are failing to realize is that towards the last couple of days of the campaign, the educational issue started to come out, where the Republican who won said parents absolutely should have a say in the school curriculum, And the Democrat, the incumbent, said no, they shouldn't. Well, any fool, yes, it's political suicide. Thank you. That's exactly what I'm saying. Political suicide. Anybody with any ounce of common sense knows that teachers teach the curriculum based on what the district school board lists as the curriculum. And the district school board for each school is voted on by the voters, which are parents. So parents don't necessarily tell the school board what is the curriculum. Of course, they can attend the meetings, they can write letters, they can communicate, but the parents and the voters in that district elect the school board or recall the school board or whatever the case may be. And the comparison that I draw is that both Aaron Rodgers' team as well as the team of the idiot that told the Republican incumbent to say that parents should not have a say in the school board, those were both political suicide. Those team members should be fired immediately and new teams should be brought in. John, if you want, do a very quick comment and then I want to do the break and then we'll get to the news.
No, I think it was an off the cuff comment. I'm not sure anybody on his team advised him to say that. It was the Democratic guy who said that. He wasn't the incumbent. He had been the governor before, but in Virginia you can't have consecutive terms. But he had been the prior governor, and and it was just an idiotic statement because you're right. Parents have plenty of input anyway, and as we all know in America, if enough people get outraged, something will be stricken from the curriculum. So. That's the way it goes. I mean, I'm fond of pointing out that I went to a Jesuit, which is sort of Catholic high school in San Francisco. And my reading list back then from 1960 to 1964 would probably cause lawsuits in Kansas. Okay. I mean, it was a very liberal reading list and it was very open-minded. And so, but that was part of the reason why I've always respected some parts of private education more than public education, because we weren't subject to public pressure.
It may have been an off-the-cuff comment, but my understanding is it was the majority of what was discussed back and forth in the last couple of days of the election. And I believe, if not the most reason for the Republican getting elected, it was absolutely one of the main reasons why the Republican was elected. Because when it comes down to it, the cost of gas, the cost of a gallon of milk, how much your rent and or mortgage is, and what control you have over your kids going to school. That's what Americans really care about. And it's always been consistently like that ever since I've been alive. You're dialed into Work Comp Matters. We're brought to you by mancavepodcasting.com. If you want to do your own podcast anywhere in the world, all you have to do is talk. It's one low fee, one time. And we take care of production, direction. We stream it live. We get it into the cloud forever. It's one low fee, mancavepodcasting.com. And now we're going to go to the Work Comp Matters news that we believe affects you, employees, employers, and of course, we haven't forgotten about you, damn independent contract.
A judge takes his mental health struggles public. In 1972, just 18 days after he was selected to run for vice president with Democratic Senator George McGovern, Thomas Eagleton was forced off the ticket. The issue, years earlier, Eagleton had been hospitalized and treated with electroshock therapy for depression. The disclosure of his mental health history was a blow from which the Missouri senator could not recover. In fact, I believe he was removed from the ticket. Eagleton's torpedoed candidacy has been a cautionary tale for elected officials ever since, says Superior Court Judge Tim Fall, who serves in Yolo County. But rather than remain quiet as he approached his own re-election season last year, Fall came out with a book that detailed his decades-long struggle with anxiety and depression. As it turned out, Fall was unopposed for another 6-year term in office, but it was a previous challenge for his seat that had triggered his most difficult bout with mental illness. Fall, who has a law degree from UC Davis, was 35, which is really young, and then Governor Pete Wilson, a Republican, appointed him as a municipal judge in 1995. just as a sidelight, this goes back to what I was saying about the federal courts in the South. You notice that this guy was appointed by Pete Wilson, who's extremely conservative, and this guy sits in Yolo County, which is extremely conservative. So, that's how you end up with a judge that reflects what's going on in the county. 3 years later, he became a Superior Court judge. And then he goes on and talks about his struggles and how he generally had kept it quiet because of the opprobrium in America for saying you had problems with mental illness. And I just want to say two things. First of all, I know Steve can remember, and I know I certainly remember, back when a lot of health insurance wouldn't even cover psychiatric treatment because they decided it wasn't a real disease. And so they said, nah, anybody who's got a psych problem, that's just for pansies and people who are spoiled. And so, we're not going to cover it. So there was a real battle to get it covered. And I'm not even sure it's covered at full bore today. I'm not even sure it's covered at 100% today anymore. I don't know. It's been a long time since I've been in America, but I don't think it is. So that's one of the problems in the system. Plus, the fact is that there was this sort of disgraceful thing about, well, you're a weak person for admitting that you've got problems with your brain. No, I mean, you're a person who's got a grip on reality and says, okay, I'm having troubles and I need help. I mean, that's what you're supposed to do. That's actually an indication of strength when you can admit that you've got a problem and you can go to the appropriate person to try to help and fix it. And so I think it's great that this guy has come out and said, here was my struggle with depression and anxiety, and I'm a sitting judge. And I want you to know that when you get treatment for it and you get successful treatment for it or deal with it, you can still do your job. And I think that's great.
John, if you asked me before a couple of hours ago who is the current United States Surgeon General, I couldn't tell you. Well, now I know because there's a story in our news. United States Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy defended the actions of the Biden administration in a Sunday interview on ABC's This Week after it announced a sweeping COVID-19 vaccine mandate for companies with 100 employees or more. The president and the administration would have put these requirements in place if they didn't think that they were appropriate and necessary, and the administration is certainly prepared to defend them, Murthy told ABC News. Well, that's interesting. Thank you, United States Surgeon General, who said Biden is right for doing it because if he didn't think it was right, he wouldn't have done it. I appreciate all the science and the common sense.
Lagging vaccination rates could keep the Bay Area's Black students out of school, with some Bay Area school districts requiring students to get COVID-19 shots to return to class. Black students are being vaccinated at rates far below their peers, exacerbating long-standing racial disparities laid bare by the pandemic and raising fears that Black students could be disproportionately shut out of public school. I've got to say this, that's one sentence. I don't know if anybody ever teaches people who write the news these days that sentences are supposed to be crisp and to the point and short, but apparently not. That was worthy of Cicero. But anyway, the vaccine gap is significant, according to an analysis of county health department data by this news organization. In 5 core Bay Area counties, 52% of Black students between the ages of 12 and 17 have received at least one shot, compared with 85% of all students. The reasons for the disparity are complex, and it goes on and on. I think what we really have to focus on is the fact that there is an extreme lack of communication between our elected officials, the establishment, and minority communities. I mean, there's an extreme lack of distrust. Yeah, they know some of the history that justifies skepticism. They know that Black people were used as experimental lab rats in various medical experiments, but I truly believe that those days are long gone. But the fact is that in order to establish confidence, in order to establish the fact that your government is actually telling you the truth and we're not trying to do a medical experiment on you, obviously government has failed. Obviously, there's been a failure to convince the minority communities that the government is looking out for their best interests. Now, that's obviously a broad problem. How you go about solving it is something beyond my ability to comment in this space of time. But it's clearly a problem, and it's really a shame.
This is from USA Today. Most employees favor President Joe Biden's efforts to mandate COVID-19 vaccines for employees at large companies, and many workers would consider reporting a coworker for violating the vaccine rules. A new study suggests a vast majority of employees view vaccinations as a political issue, which can be tough to navigate in a professional workplace. The survey also found an overwhelming 84% of employees said politics influences their company leaders' handling of vaccines, masks, and testing policies. In fact, the top reason people reported for staying unvaccinated was a lack of trust in the government, which John was just saying. Let me say this. I think there's more of a lack of trust in the government now than ever before. One of the contributing factors is very rarely do we have a consensus in government in what is right, what is wrong, what you should do, what you shouldn't. But, and I've said the following for quite a while now. If you do not think that the vaccine is political, you've been living under a rock. Of course it's political. There's no question it's political. It shouldn't be, but it is. John.
Yeah, unfortunately it is. I got to get to this story because, a while back I read one about Kaiser going on strike. So here you go. And this is an interesting insight into how companies, even a so-called nonprofit, handle their labor management problems. More than 30,000 healthcare workers are on the verge of striking. On November 4, a handful of unions representing more than 30,000 Kaiser Permanente workers notified the health system of their intention to strike on November 15, a move that would be among the largest hospital workplace actions in recent memory. The strike, should workers not make a deal with their employer, would be truly massive in scope. Goes on. Now listen to this. Now this is really hard to believe. In preparation for November 15, a staffing agency is already recruiting strike nurses in Southern California who would be paid as much as $12,500 a day to help Kaiser cut wages for new employees by as much as 36% and avoid giving its current workers more than a 1% raise. Kaiser,
John, that's got to be wrong. John, that has to be wrong.
Oh, I saw an interview. I saw an interview not too long ago on CNN where they were interviewing a traveling nurse, and the traveling nurse was called in because the nurses are burnt out. They can't handle. They leave, so they need these temporary traveling nurses. And they had a permanent nurse, and the permanent nurse said, "Well, I know you probably earn 2 or 3 times what I do per day." And you know what the traveling nurse said?
What?
She said, I hate to tell you this, but I earn 10 times a day what you earn. So no, it's not a mistake. That's not a typo. That's what that's what management does when they really want to crush a union. And, and I'm not surprised.
$12,500 a day?
Yes.
For one nurse.
And if you want proof that this is how management will operate, go back in the history of Los Angeles, go back to the Hearst newspaper in LA that actually went out of existence because they tried these same tactics when they tried to crush their union, and they brought all kinds of employees from out of state. They paid for their apartments. They gave them way more than they were paying their regular employees. And ultimately they spent 20 years or so litigating, and the paper went out of business, which basically handed the LA market to the LA Times on a platter. I know because I worked on part of that strike when I was doing some work. So,
John, what's the number of that story? It's
number 37.
37. Okay. John, we got 1 minute left. Closing thoughts, burning desires.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think we've hit on some of the problems that America has today, and that aren't really being dealt with yet. And there are problems that are continuing to go on, and unless they're dealt with, they're going to have permanent damaging effects.
And thank you very much for that. And we are out of time. I want to thank you all for joining into another edition of Work Comp Matters. Much thanks to Scott Walton of Legendary Uncle's Studio, John Scalia out in Munich, Germany, and all the good people at my empire, mancavepodcasting.com. My name's Steve Appel. We'll see you again live, 12 noon, for another edition of Work Comp Matters. Bye, everybody.